and that more than half of the world's countries now fall into its difficult or very serious categories. Ambassador Gauri Shankar Gupta, former diplomat, Ambassador Sushil Singhal, former diplomat. Both my esteemed panelists are joining me on this broadcast for this discussion that will follow. And I want to go across first to, before that, I'd like to welcome both my guests, and I want to go across to Ambassador Gupta. Ambassador Gupta, now this is of course the basic that we've mentioned to our viewers, but there is a lot of critique that is coming in for this, and a lot of people are saying that all of these things, the results that come out of this are not accurate, and we're going to dig deep and deep dive into every point on this discussion. But what would you like to say initially?
Good afternoon, Vaisali. You see, the global situation has undergone a very substantial change, particularly after the second term of President Trump. As soon as he took over in January 25, he started his transactional, diplomacy. And first he tried to impose what we call reciprocal tariff. In fact, in most cases he did that, but fortunately, or for everybody, the Supreme Court of US turned down his entire, what we call transactional diplomacy on tariffs. So we were saved, but still he imposed 50% additional tariff on India for imports of Russian oil. So that not only disturbed India, but also the global economy, because Europeans were also unhappy. Even Japanese, Koreans, Chinese, everybody was unhappy because of this situation. And then soon thereafter, we saw that, the war in the Middle East in the last 3 months has created a serious problem. The energy crisis has taken over in the entire world is suffering. You see, European oil prices are almost 50%, 60% higher. In India, the prices are about 15, 20% higher. Even in US, the prices are approximately 70, 80% higher. So energy crisis has become a serious issue. In addition, the supply chain has also been disturbed because a large number of inputs which were coming for pharmaceutical industry, for plastic industry, for agriculture, fertilizer, etc., were also disturbed because of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. So all that has caused a worldwide economic depression of sorts plus inflation. So that has been impacted because of this crisis, and that crisis was in obviously was triggered by President Trump's policies in against Iran or in the Middle East. And then, of course, the war in Ukraine continues, and that has the sanctions against Russia. They are also impacting. So all this has impacted the global economy in a large way. The people in most countries are very unhappy with the current situation. They are all hoping that the two wars, one in Ukraine and another in Middle East, come to an end and the life becomes normal. But things have, for the time being, changed for worse, and every country in some way or the other has been impacted adversely. And then, of course, you have also seen his, his approach against Greenland, against Canada, and also to some extent on NATO countries have also, shaken the belief of the people. So all these are leading to what we call new alignments in geopolitics. President Rubio, sorry, Foreign Minister Rubio's visit to India was to undo this damage to the extent possible, because the whole Indo-US relationship was completely derailed in the last 8, 9 months, particularly since June, July last year. And now, hopefully, some thing would be reset, and we hope that the relations will be back on track in the coming months and weeks. But it will all again depend on the situation evolving in the Middle East. If the Iran war continues, then obviously things will not improve so soon. Over to you, Vaishali.
All right. Ambassador Gupta, I'm going to come back to you. There has perhaps been a little bit of a confusion on the topic here. We're actually discussing the World Press Freedom Index, which has been published. But let me get your input shortly on that. I do have Ambassador Sushil Singhal, who's joining me. He's a former diplomat as well. And Ambassador Singhal, now let's just talk about the controversy which is surrounding this, because, you know, Ambassador Singhal, this is a very detailed kind of a logarithmic formula which is applied when it comes to this. And, you know, the criticism is that respondent level inputs, country level survey data and raw questionnaires, responses are not publicly released in full, which is where the critique of this is arising from. What would you like to say on that?
Well, Vaishali, we know the origin of this controversy in India, particularly. The thing is, this RSF, or Reporters Without Borders. This is an organization which was set up in, as we know, in 1985 by 4 journalists. And their idea was very limited when they formed it, was to campaign and advocacy group. That was their mandate. And over a period of time, it started taking different kind of mandate. It became a sort of a guardian of the rights of the journalists. And then also, and further expanded into become a sort of a decider of the press freedom around the world. And they have, their own criteria. They claim that they have five criteria, and also claim that they have 8 independent auditors or advisors who sort of guide their stuff. But as you rightly mentioned, we don't know. No, they don't disclose whom these questionnaires are being sent, and how they are also are they balanced questionnaires. And as we see in the ranking, the certain countries are always on the top, despite the fact we have many recorded incidents of physical attack on the journalists, but still they continue to be on the top of the list. I don't know what is the reason, but it raises some questions about the sanctity of what they are doing, and the kind of funding they get. They're getting a funding from U.S. Congress. They're getting funding from various government organizations, be it Sweden, France, and other Nordic countries. So how they maintain that independence when they are questioning the newspapers about their ownership, but they themselves are, I think there is some issue there in their, how they're getting the money to fund their, activities. And also, there is no independent audit. This is self-decision. They collect the answers from whom they are collecting, and we don't know. Nobody knows. They don't disclose what kind of, what are their political views. The people from whom they are collecting, nobody knows. But they become the arbiter of the press freedom. I will use the word self-appointed arbiter of the press, independence of the press. But do they take into account the cultural differences, political differences? Every country has its own culture, but they try to judge everything by their standard, because they say that democracy, the way it is run in Western countries or in Europe, is the only democracy, is the only definition of the democracy, and that is how everybody has to run. But is it justified? I do not think so. They are, as I said, self-appointed arbiters of the press freedom, and I do not think they have any justification unless they reform themselves and let themselves open to audit, or by the monitored by the external people, including countries from the people from the developing countries. Because as I see that there is no member, none of the advisors is from any developing country, from the global south. So again, they have decided on their own that they will impose their wish and decide by their standards, and judge everybody. So, in my view, I think it's a very biased, what is reports which they are coming and the way they report, because there is a question on also on how they count the incidents. That also is a question mark here. And so, in my view, I think this just this the not much credence should be given to their reporting, and the way it is given again is the Western propaganda in my view, because it suits them, and they are always on the higher rank despite what is happening out there. Vaishali.
All right. Thank you for that, Ambassador Singhal. Of course, very pertinent points raised there. Now, Ambassador Gauri Shankar Gupta, when it comes to the World Press Forum Index, I was reading multiple things before we got on to this debate. And, there are a lot of loopholes in the ranking system. Critics argue that because expert judgment materially contributes to final rankings, greater transparency around respondent selection and aggregation would improve reproducibility and make external evaluation easier. And another criticism which is being raised by some journalists is that respondent opinion could potentially be shaped by political preference, institutional incentives, or differing interpretations of media conditions. So what would you like to say on that?
Vaishali, first of all, I'm very sorry for
Absolutely not, Ambassador Gupta. I've briefed our producers to be more careful. But yes, the topic was different. Yes, not a problem, Ambassador Gupta, not at all.
Okay. Now I can see, let me explain this. You see, these indices, not only the World Press Freedom Index, but Happiness Index, and there are so many other indices, they keep issuing. Now this actually indicates what we call the dominating tendency of the Western world. They still feel that the South, the global South, is still there, under their control. It is more like the colonization of the global South. So they claim to be the judge of all that we are doing. That is the biggest, I would say, yardstick they use. That we are the one who will judge and you will be subjected to that judgment. And that is one tendency in the entire Western world. I can tell you, I have lived in Western world for more than 20 years. Their press is systematically managed. Systematically, I can tell you that the French press, the Belgian press, the press in US, which newspaper will write in what manner. These are all systematically managed and systematically, controlled by the government. It is absolutely very, very clear to me. I have seen two countries in the world during my entire career, that is India and the Philippines, which have the maximum freedom in terms of press. And those countries are relegated in the ranking to a very, very low level. Because these people have a motivation. I don't know what is their motivation, but obviously the motivation is to somehow pinpoint that these countries are not doing well, or the tendency to judge others is the main reason. And these are funded by certain NGOs, including George Soros NGO. He is also one of those guys who keep funding and trying to bring India down. And then other reason is that most of these countries cannot live with the rise of India. In the last 15 years, India has risen tremendously. The GDP has gone up. It was at the 12th position, now it is at the 4th position in the global GDP. The economy is rising at a rate of 7 to 8% per annum. Now these people are not able to live with it. They feel that they are still the ruler of the world, and therefore they bring down all these kind of indices, and they try to impose these yardsticks on us. Now nobody knows how they decide, what they decide. You look around India, you have how many, about 1,000 TV stations. There may be several thousand YouTubers. There may be several thousand newspapers in different languages of the country. And there's a total freedom who can write what. Despite that, these people try to bring India down. The whole idea is that they want to judge you, they have that colonial approach, and they want to still impose their judgment on the other countries. So I think we should not give them too much importance. In my view, all these indices should be completely ignored. A time has come when country like India should come out with indices if necessary. We should have these agencies. The same thing applies to these, what we call, the B plus and B plus 1, all these Moody's rankings and standard, these other rankings in the economic context. Now, those rankings are also manipulated. They are manipulated in such a way that the countries of the South do not rise beyond a point. And that is their strategy. I'm absolutely convinced, Vaisali, that this is still dominated by their mindset, which is entirely colonial. And they are the one who have committed greatest sin in the world. And they have, starting from slave trade, if you go to some of the ports in Africa, you will find how the slaves were, carried in the ship like herds. Even our own people in certain ways, those who went to Mauritius, those who went to Trinidad and Tobago, those who went to some other parts of the world, they were carried like that. And then they, of course, had apartheid in South Africa. They violated all the basic human rights in the last century for almost 200 years. And now they are trying to judge others. It's very ridiculous. But I think the only way is that we should ignore them and we should come out with our own indices so that we can say them, we can show them their own face.
All right, and with that, I'd like to thank both my guests, Ambassador Gauri Shankar Gupta and Ambassador Sushil Singhal. Always a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for joining me. Now, viewers, shifting focus. The West Bengal Home and Hill Affairs Department has written to all district magistrates